She's just a mechanic, not a pilot. Stand aside, the commander shouted across the base as snow began to fall. The medical helicopter sat motionless. No one dared to fly, but the small woman didn't back down. She climbed into the pilot's seat, put on her gloves, started the engine in silence. 30 minutes later, rotor blades whirred through the blinding snow. 5 soldiers came home alive. The only pilot that day was the mechanic meet, Corporal Ellie Tran, 29 years old, chief maintenance technician for UH-60 Blackhawk helicopters at Cold Ridge Base, Alaska, the harshest, most unforgiving military outpost in North America. Growing up in rural Oregon, with her Vietnamese grandmother Ellie, chose grease under her fingernails over nail polish while other girls played with dolls. She dismantled radios and rebuilt lawnmower engines, her grandmother used to say. "Kungai, your hands speak to machines in ways your mouth never could." She joined the Army at 18, with one dream getting closer to aircraft than anyone else alive. For 11 years, she'd been the ghost behind every successful flight, the one who checked rotor blade tension at 4 a.m., the one who diagnosed engine problems by sound alone, the one who could strip and rebuild a transmission blindfolded, but never the one allowed in the pilot's seat. Despite earning her civilian pilot's license from Portland Flight Academy, paying for every hour with weekend mechanic jobs, her military superiors refused recognition, not through official military pilot training channels. They'd say dismissively, as if her civilian certificate was printed on toilet paper, December 15th, 32 degrees Fahrenheit wind gust hitting. 40 knots, a 6-person reconnaissance patrol call sign. Bravo team reported losing radio contact while navigating the treacherous Valker Canyon Pass. Thick snow, hurricane-force winds, radar systems rendered completely useless by electromagnetic interference from the storm. The base emergency alarm shrieked across every building. Red lights flashed, boots pounded on frozen concrete. A combat search and rescue team assembled in the briefing room. Maps spread across tables. Weather reports scrolled on monitors showing impossible flying conditions. Every qualified pilot studied the data and reached the same conclusion. Mission impossible. Two, dangerous career suicide. Zero visibility meant certain death one by one. Each pilot declined the mission. Lieutenant Rodriguez shook his head. Captain Martinez cited safety protocols. Major Stevens referenced regulation. Charlie 7 about minimum weather requirements. Ellie heard the heated discussions from her workshop where she was replacing hydraulic seals on 60 tail, number 472. Her fingers worked methodically, but her ears tracked every word through the thin walls. Radio chatter grew more desperate. Bravo team signals weakening with each transmission, hypothermia setting in time, running out like sand through an hourglass. She wiped her hands clean, set down her torque wrench, and walked toward the briefing room. "Huge 60 number 4 is mission ready," she announced quietly. "I just finished the complete maintenance cycle this morning. All systems green." Lieutenant Hartley spun around, his face flushed with frustration and barely controlled anger. "Corporal Tran, you're a mechanic, not a pilot. This is a combat situation requiring actual flight certification. Stand aside and let the professionals handle this." Ellie's hand instinctively moved to her father's dog tags hanging beneath her uniform. Master Sergeant David Tran. Air Force Rescue, killed in action during a hurricane evacuation mission off the Gulf Coast when she was 12 years old. His final radio transmissions still echoed in her memory 17 years later. If you've ever been underestimated just because people didn't know what you'd learned in silence, leave a dot in the comments. 45 minutes passed. The storm intensified. Every qualified pilot found new reasons to avoid the mission. Bravo team's radio signals grew weaker, more desperate, more distant. Ellie returned to her workshop, but instead of picking up tools, she opened her personal locker. Inside hung her father's flight suit, the one the military had returned with his personal effects. She'd kept it pressed and clean for 17 years, waiting for the right moment. This was that moment. She slipped into the familiar fabric, adjusted the shoulder straps, and zipped it up slowly. The name tape still read Tran in faded black letters. For the first time since childhood, she felt her father's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder from the locker's top shelf. She retrieved his leather-bound technical manual, dog-eared pages filled with handwritten notes, diagrams, and maintenance procedures on the final page. Written in his precise handwriting were the words that had shaped her entire adult life. Ellie, if you're ever in a position to choose between safety and saving lives, choose life over silence. The machines will tell you what they need. Trust them, trust yourself, love Dad. She tucked the manual under her arm and walked toward UH-60. Number 472. Only one person intercepted her path staff. Sergeant Miguel Ramirez, 63 years old crew chief with 38 years of flight experience. The man who had flown rescue missions with her father during the Hurricane Katrina operations. Mija, he said quietly, using the Spanish endearment he'd called her since she arrived at Cold Ridge. Are you absolutely certain about this flying blind in a Category 4 blizzard without ground radar support? That's not just dangerous, that's a death sentence wrapped in good intentions. Ellie stopped walking and looked directly into his weathered face. His eyes held the same concern she'd seen in her grandmother's expression every time she'd attempted something beyond her supposed capabilities. Sergeant Ramirez, she said, her voice steady as steel, if I don't go right now, who exactly is going to bring those 5 soldiers home to their families? The question hung in the frozen air between them like a challenge to the universe itself. Ramirez studied her face for a long moment. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his pocket and withdrew his senior crew chief access card, the magnetic strip that could override cockpit security locks. Your father would be proud, he whispered, pressing the card into her gloved hand. He always said you had more natural flight instinct than pilots with 10,000 log hours. Inside the helicopter's cabin, familiar territory welcomed her home. Every switch, every gauge, every warning light had been touched by her hands during countless maintenance procedures. She probably knew this aircraft's personality better than her own. But knowing and flying were different animals entirely. She strapped herself into the pilot's seat, adjusted the mirrors, and began her pre-flight checklist from memory. Fuel pumps. Check. Hydraulic pressure, nominal engine temperature parameters, all-green rotor system, diagnostics perfect through the windscreen, visibility measured exactly 0. The weather station reported sustained winds at 65 knots with gusts exceeding 80. Snow fell so thickly it looked like flying through a milkshake. No wonder every certified pilot had refused this mission. This wasn't just challenging flying. This was attempting the aeronautical equivalent of performing brain surgery while blindfolded during an earthquake. But Ellie understood something those pilots didn't. Sometimes impossible just means no one has been desperate enough to try. Yet she clipped her father's dog tags to the instrument panel beside the compass and keyed the radio microphone. Have you ever known someone who didn't wait for the green light but stepped forward on their own share? That's Story Cold Ridge Base. This is Black Hawk 472 requesting immediate emergency takeoff clearance for search and rescue operations. The radio exploded with overlapping voices. Negative, Tran. You are not authorized for flight operations. Stand down immediately. That's a direct order. Abort mission. Return to maintenance bay. Ellie calmly switched to the emergency frequency and spoke with the measured tone of someone who had already crossed the point of no return. Cold Ridge Base. I have 5 American soldiers to recover from Valker Canyon, going radio silent until mission completion. Black Hawk 472 out. She turned off the radio completely. Silence filled her headset except for engine noise and rotor blade rhythm sounds. She'd heard 10,000 times, but never from the pilot's seat. The vibrations felt different here, more personal, more alive. She pulled collective pitch, applied forward circuit pressure, and lifted off into what looked like the inside of a snow globe being shaken by an angry giant. The base disappeared beneath her in seconds, swallowed completely by the white wall of wind and ice crystals flying in 0 visibility, required abandoning normal human senses and trusting instruments completely. but the storm had knocked out GPS navigation, rendered radar useless, and turned the terrain-following system into expensive decoration. Ellie was flying by pure intuition and mechanical sympathy. She descended to 200 feet above ground level, low enough to potentially detect heat signatures high enough to avoid hitting trees or power lines. She couldn't see the helicopter bucked and rolled like a wild horse trying to throw its rider ice accumulated on the rotor blades, changing their aerodynamic properties every few minutes. She compensated by feel-adjusting collective pitch and engine power to maintain stable flight characteristics. Most pilots would have turned back within 5 minutes. But Ellie wasn't most pilots. She was a mechanic who understood exactly how much structural stress this machine could absorb before catastrophic failure. She knew its engineering tolerances better than the Sikorsky designers who built it after 18 minutes of flying through what felt like being inside a washing machine filled with concrete mix. Her thermal imaging scanner detected the first heat signature, 4 human forms clustered together in a shallow depression. Using emergency blankets and body heat to keep an injured teammate conscious, Ellie began her descent, fighting cross winds that tried to slam her into invisible canyon walls. The rotor wash kicked up snow clouds that made visibility even worse, if that was possible at 50-foot altitude. She opened the rear cabin door and activated the external loudspeaker. United States Army Black Hawk medical evacuation moved to the aircraft immediately through the swirling snow. She saw soldiers stumbling toward her helicopter, carrying their wounded comrade between them. One soldier's voice crackled through his radio to base operations. "Holy Mother of God, who did they send?" Staff Sergeant Ramirez answered from the operations center. They sent the mechanic. But according to Bravo Team's personnel roster, 6 soldiers had departed on patrol. She'd only recovered 4. 2 were still missing somewhere in this frozen hell. Ellie lifted off again, flying deeper into Valker Canyon, where terrain features created wind shears that could flip aircraft upside down. Without warning, her thermal scanner swept back and forth, searching for human heat signatures against the sub-zero background there, 800 meters ahead. 2 faint thermal blooms near what appeared to be an ice shelf overhang as she approached the situation. Became clear 2 soldiers trapped beneath a partial ice collapse, one with an obviously broken leg. The other showing signs of severe hypothermia. Landing was impossible on the rocky ice-covered terrain. She'd have to use the rescue hoist. Ellie engaged the helicopter's hover mode and lowered the rescue cable. Then she did something that would have horrified any flight safety instructor. She strapped herself to the hoist and rappelled down personally to assist the evacuation. The wind at ground level hit like frozen hammers. Every gust threatened to smash her against the rock face or tangle her in the rescue cables. Working with numb fingers, she rigged both soldiers to separate hoist lines and signaled the helicopter's automatic winch system to begin lifting. As they rose toward the aircraft, a massive wind shear caught the helicopter and threw it sideways against the canyon wall. For 3 terrifying seconds, Ellie thought they were all about to become statistics, but the machine held together because she had built it to hold together total flight time in impossible conditions. 34 minutes. Total American soldiers brought home alive, 5. Have you ever misjudged someone just because they spoke quietly? Maybe they were silently preparing to do something you'd never dare. When Black Hawk 472 touched down at Cold Ridge Base, the entire garrison stood at attention in the falling snow. 300 soldiers formed perfect ranks on the flight line, their breath creating clouds in the -40 air. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were rotor blades winding down and wind whistling through the base structures. Then from somewhere in the formation, one soldier began clapping slowly. Another joined, then another. Within seconds, thunderous applause echoed off every building, punctuated by cheers and whistles. Lieutenant Hartley approached the aircraft as Ellie shut down the engines. His face showed emotions he struggled to control: embarrassment, respect, and something approaching awe. "Corporal Tran," he said formally, then stopped and started over Ellie. "I was completely wrong. You're not just a mechanic. You're hell, I don't know what you are, but you're sure as not just a mechanic." Ellie removed her flight helmet and gloves, then climbed down from the cockpit. Her legs felt unsteady after 34 minutes of fighting physics and weather simultaneously. "Sir, with all due respect," she replied quietly, "I am still a mechanic today. I just happened to be a mechanic who knew how to fly the machine. I'd spent 11 years maintaining. 1 week later, the base commander organized an official medal ceremony. The Army wanted to award Ellie the Distinguished Flying Cross and fast-track her into pilot training. She didn't attend the ceremony. Instead, she was in Hangar 7, performing routine maintenance on UH-6472, cleaning, inspecting, and caring for the machine that had trusted her with 5 lives and brought them all home safely. Staff Sergeant Ramirez found her there holding a handwritten letter from Sergeant First Class Johnson, one of the soldiers she'd rescued from the ice shelf, ma'am. "I never saw your face clearly through all that snow and chaos, but lying on that cold helicopter floor, listening to those engines fighting the storm, I knew I was being saved by someone who didn't need medals or recognition. Someone who just did what needed doing because it needed doing. Thank you for bringing us home." Ellie folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her father's old technical manual, right next to his final message about choosing life over silence. The letter meant more than any medal or combination ever could that evening alone in the hangar with her helicopter. She understood something profound. She didn't need anyone to call her a pilot anymore. She didn't need the title or the recognition. She just needed the opportunity to do what she'd always known she could do, save lives with machines. She understood better than most people understood themselves. If you believe people don't need titles to do the right thing, follow this channel. Every video gives back honor to someone who was once overlooked. Some people aren't permitted in the cockpit, but they're the only ones brave enough to start the engines when everyone else steps backward. Some people don't wear officers' rank on their shoulders, but they carry the weight of human souls in their capable hands. Don't rush to judge anyone by their job title or position in the hierarchy, because sometimes the person who fixes the machine understands exactly how to operate it. When bringing people home is the only thing that matters. The real heroes aren't always wearing the expected uniforms or carrying the anticipated credentials. They're the ones who step forward when stepping forward becomes the only moral choice remaining